Psycho-Horror-Show wird dir präsentiert von Illusion Films.
Viel Spaß. Ja, im kleinen Horrorladen mit den neuesten Filmen. Mit den neuesten Filmen.
Psycho-Horror-Show.
Jo, es ist wieder Zeit für die Psycho-Horror-Show. Heute mit einem ganz speziellen Gast, der mir persönlich sehr am Herzen liegt. Absolutes Idol von mir. Und zwar sind wir heute hier am Nifff 2011 mit dem Herschel Gorden Lewis, dem Godfather of Gore. Hello, once again.
It's a pleasure to be speaking with you. Thank you for that introduction.
For me, it's such a big honor you cannot imagine. It's very nice to have you here. Thank you once again.
I am very pleased to have been invited here, so we both are happy.
Cool, perfect. So you are the Godfather of Gore.
Well, that's what I've been called.
Yes.
Now, I didn't call myself that. A film historian, looking back into time, realized that Blood Feast was the first of what we now call splatter films. Mm-hmm. And so he plastered the name, the Godfather of Gore, and it somehow stuck. And I don't object to it at all.
Okay. But
I don't think I would want that on my epitaph in the cemetery, but I certainly don't object to it. And now, the fellow who now owns all my old movies, a man named Jimmy Maslin, and a partner of his, Frank Henenlotter, have made a documentary, which they call The Godfather of Gore.
Yeah.
And it's showing here at this festival later on in the week.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, but the name sounds good.
I no longer cringe when I hear it. No.
Okay. My first question is, I'm really interested to know when you have started to make films.
I started to make films long before you were born, long before almost anybody was born.
So.
But what happened was, I started as a school teacher. I taught English literature at a university.
Okay.
And from there, that history is too long to even try to consolidate, but I got a job in the advertising business.
Okay.
And at the advertising agency, they made me director of television. Mm-hmm. I was their television director.
Okay.
And this is in the early days in which nobody knew anything about television. They still don't. Well, I said, the only way to make any money is to shoot features. He said, well, why don't you shoot features? Which is a dumb question, like saying, why aren't you rich? But that planted the seed. And I began to inquire around about the possibility of shooting a full-length feature film. I had 35 millimeter movie equipment. Mm-hmm. It was old, but it worked. I had lights and sound equipment.
So
they were old, but they worked.
Okay.
And one advantage that I had that some of these studios didn't have, I could get actors and technicians cheaply. Because I was sitting there in Chicago, of all places, where nobody makes movies, with good reason, by the way. And that's what got me into the movie business. Once I had made the first movie, which was called The Prime Time, I made every mistake you could possibly imagine. Like many first-timers, I was a big shot. I wasn't going to get my hands dirty. I hired a director. I hired people. I wasted more money than you can imagine.
Okay.
But it was an education. I paid for an education. And by the time I made the second movie, which was called Living Venus, I had a little better idea of what to do. And from that point forward, the movies began to make money. And I came to the conclusion that it wasn't the movie that made the money, it was the campaign. At that time, that's before we had video cassettes or DVDs certainly. An independent movie either made its cost back in the theaters or simply sat in a vault somewhere rotting away.
Okay.
So I became the master of campaigns to the point where people were bringing me their movies to do the campaigns for them.
Oh, okay.
The advertising and the television commercials, the press books. And I began also to realize that for an independent, the road to success, since at the time, theaters were the only outlet. The road had to be one that the major film companies were not riding their wagons on. What kind of motion picture might there be? The major film companies either would not make or could not make. And eventually, after a lot of scrabbling around with various kinds of movies, I settled on gore. And the reason I did was no one had ever made a movie of that type before. Not ever.
That was the reason you were thinking about. No one else have ever done before this.
Yeah.
And then you got the idea to show some gore in the movies.
Yes, indeed. Because I was watching on television a gangster movie. And the police were chasing this gangster. Shooting him, and he died with a little splash. Yeah. Wait a minute.
Without blood and anything?
Yes.
Okay.
Someone asked who wrote the script for Blood Feast, and my answer has to be, script? What's that? We literally made that movie up as we went along.
Okay, just something out of your head.
Out of my, yeah. But what we were doing was making the kind of movie no one had made before. In fact, it was quite a negative thing as we were cutting this in my little cutting room in Chicago. And here was this work print with greased pencil marks on it. People walking by said, is this a medical film? And I said, oh my, what have we done here? No one will ever go to see this movie. How wrong I was. And when we opened Blood Feast, what I wanted to do, because I was by that time terrified that I had, even as cheaply as I had made that movie, that I had simply wasted the money. No one would ever look at it.
Okay.
We decided to open it in a theater in a town called Peoria, which is about, 100 miles from Chicago. Mm-hmm. So it was close enough that we could have some control, but far enough that if we died in Peoria, who would know? We opened on a Friday in a drive-in theater in Peoria. And we were determined we are not going to go near that place. They can't force us to even see it. By Saturday, we couldn't stand it. So my partner, David Friedman, who, by the way, died only about 2 months ago.
Oh, sorry.
We got in the car and we drove to Peoria. And about a mile from the theater, here was this traffic jam. I said, that's all we need, an accident on the highway to the theater. We were the accident. In one day, the word of mouth of that picture had thrown the whole area into chaos. People were driving up in cars loaded with people, and then 2 more people hidden at a drive-in theater where you pay by the person, so there were 2 more people hidden in the trunk of the car. And I could not believe the business we did. As, by the way, a strange change in the world of motion picture exhibition. Blood Feast destroyed the concession stand business. nobody would go to the concession stand. And now, I notice when a theater is playing a splatter movie, the concession stand does twice the amount of business it would with a conventional film. Interesting comment on how human psychology changes.
Yeah, that was interesting because that is another question. I'm really interested to know what was the reactions, but you already told me.
Oh, the reaction. Well, the critics, of course, hated this movie from the word go. So. I don't think I have ever made a movie the critics liked. And what they tend to do, and I'm used to it now, they extend their criticism of the movie over to the people who made the movie, which suggests, of course, that the people who made this movie, 1, are illiterate, 2, they are morons, 3, they are vicious killers, 4, they should be driven from town and buried in an open pit. I said to my partner, David Friedman, what if we made a good one? And that was the genesis of 2000 Maniacs. Because 2000 Maniacs, which we're screening tonight, I understand, here, it's about it has to do with the United States Civil War back in the 1800s.
2,000 maniacs, crazed for carnage, started bathing an entire town in pulsing human blood. You'll see 6 young strangers doomed to slaughter by an ancient curse.
There came an awful sound.
And from his lips there came an awful sound.
Brutal, evil, ghastly beyond belief. You'll see the most diabolical device ever contrived, designed solely for assassination by a town of madmen, insane with bloodlust.
Stonewall took a gun and he made the Yankees run, but he...
2,000 maniacs, gruesomely stained in blood color.
Stonewall said, I'm a-giving you a dying man's request.
I'm a-giving you a dying man's request. Yeah!
Starring Playboy's favorite playmate, Connie Mason.
Yeah! Oh, the South's gonna rise again.